Hello, this is the Ramblings of an Indisciplined Mind podcast for Thursday, May 26th, I think, 2016. As of this recording, Sierra is still missing. So this episode is the penultimate episode for the Stephen Covey book. This is the next to last section. So next week we will be finishing that puppy off, which means I'm close to finishing that course up too, so it's makes me excited. So today's habit is habit number 6, synergize, and he calls it creative cooperation. And he says that the exercise of all the other habits we've discussed, the other 5, prepare us for the habit of synergy. And so what is synergy? He says it means that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. It means that the relationship which the parts have to each other is a part in and of itself. It's not only a part, but it's the most empowering, the most unifying, and the most exciting part. He says the essence is to value differences, to respect them, to build on strengths, to compensate for weaknesses. And then we have what he's calling synergistic communication. And that is when you are communicating, you're doing it in a cooperative fashion with trust. You're opening your heart and your mind to new possibilities, new alternatives, and new options. It may seem as if you're casting aside habit 2, beginning with the end of mind, but in fact you're doing the opposite. You're fulfilling it. You're not sure when you engage in this type of communication how things work out or what the end will look like. But you're believing that the end result of this type of communications will be significantly better than it was before, and that is the end you have in mind. He gives an example of a synergistic experience he had when he was helping a bunch of associates of his create a mission statement for their business. They went on a retreat high up in the mountains, and they began a first draft of the mission statement. And so to begin with, everything was respectful and careful and predictable. But then as they began to talk about alternatives and the possibilities and opportunities that were ahead of them, people began to get more trusting, to get more open and authentic, and started to think out loud. And then it turned into a spontaneous thing where people were empathic as well as empathetic, I should say, as well as courageous. And they moved out of just that safe mutual respect to the point where they were cooperative enough and trusting enough that they had true creative synergistic communication. And then what was produced out of that was a much better mission statement than they would have had if they'd just gone with the first one. He says once people have experienced a real synergy, they've been in those type of situations, they're never quite the same again. They know the possibility of having such a mind-expanding adventure, and it's they're often not quite as happy with less things. But he says the essential purpose behind creative work can be recaptured. He quotes a Far Eastern philosophy that says, we seek not to imitate the masters, rather we seek what they sought. So you can, he says you don't seek to imitate past creative synergistic experience, rather you seek new ones around new, different, and sometimes higher purposes. And that gets into talking about the aspects of communication. For dealing with trying to develop a synergistic experience to further whatever aims, you can't do it in a position where there is low trust. It has to be a high trust environment and a highly cooperative environment. And he talks about how low trust, you're going to get defensiveness, protectiveness, legalistic kind of language. Middle position is respectful communication, and then you get into the synergistic communication, and that's when you got the trust there, you got the cooperation there, And he says when you're doing that, then synergy means that 1 plus 1 might equal 8 or 16 or maybe even 1600. The high trust produces solutions better than any other originally proposed, and everybody knows it. And then the other thing is that people tend to, it's a creative exercise, people tend to enjoy it quite a bit. He says there's usually a third alternative when you're trying to get from that middle ground, that respectful communication, into true synergy. One of the things to do is to look for the third alternative, because a lot of times if you're looking at an issue, usually you've got, we can do this or we can do this. It's either option A or either it's option B. And he says one thing that helps drive people toward thinking and communicating in a way that brings forth synergy is to look for the third option. Look for something that is not just going to be a quick fix, but something that's going to be more of a win-win. Another important part of synergy is valuing the differences. Everybody's got mental, emotional, and psychological differences. And so, part of the trust factor is knowing that I respect your differences, you respect mine, and that we aren't going to be slamming each other because of the differences that we have. If we don't respect the differences, we're never really going to be able to get beyond that point. He talks about how all nature is synergistic. That basically there are things out there that just happen naturally in ecology. He says that's basically describing the synergism within nature, and they do it without having it. We need a little bit more work, and that's what the real power in the 7 habits is. It is a principle that's the crowning achievement of all of the previous habits. It is teamwork, it is team building, development of unity, and creating with other human beings, and that's the purpose of everything that's going on down there. He says, although you can't control the paradigms of others, a great deal of synergy is within your circle of influence. So that's the circle that we can control. Our own internal synergy is completely within the circle, and then there's a large part in what we can do there. He does talk about how, getting back to the emotional bank account, a high emotional bank account is really key. He talked about, there was one example of a manager that was put in place, I think it was like at a factory or something like that. And it was a place that was having issues that needed to correct some things. And rather than just go in there and just start cracking the whip and saying, okay, these are the changes we're going to make and this is what we're going to do, he instead worked on getting to know the people, building the emotional bank accounts. And even some of the other people that were in other areas were like, you going to do anything? Come on, you going to fix this? Fix the problem. Fix it. And he took the time to really build up a good high emotional bank account with the people under him, and then they could attack the problems synergistically instead of doing it with a lesser means, and they were able to come with a much better solution that involved everybody and wasn't just a top-down kind of approach, which doesn't always work very well. So that is habit number 6, synergy. Yeah. So that's really all I was going to go through today. And it's a hot day here, and it's kind of hot in the booth here, so I'm ready to get out of it. I will be back on the road tomorrow. I'll be talking to you then. So, be seeing you.